Blizzard may have nerfed Unot, but they have not nerfed our lineup tonight. We got a full house, folks. This one's going to be really exciting. Bay and I are here as usual. Bay's going to be running all the production. I'm going to say hello and goodbye and then try to stay out of everybody's hair because we have some experts here that competed in the Mythic Dungeon International, talked about the Mythic Dungeon International on the desk. And then we got some raiders, not only from the method side of things, but also we're going to have the GM of Limit. So we got NA, we got EU, we got MDI, and we got Raiders. We got just about everything welcoming the show. We got the babe himself, J.B. We got Tettles. We got Gingy, who needs to work out. He looks very tiny. He's playing way too much WoW. He's competing in MDI. Now he's raiding again. And yeah, you can see his shirt has shrunk so much, or his shirt's so big now that the wind is actually making it flow in his pectoral area. And also we got Max here on the show. Everybody welcome. I'm trying to decide where we should even start. I think, Max, we maybe start with you so you can talk about what's going on with you guys, with your progress, and how it feels to see a nerf coming in after you guys take a little bit of a break.
Well, I think you never want to see a nerf if a boss is killable. I'm not quite sure. I haven't watched too much of it. I think one of our guildmates, actually, THD, has been doing casting over one of their streams, and it's actually gone. It's actually very. I'm really proud of him. He's, I mean, strangely very, very good at that. I mean, you know it, yeah. But he. So as much as I know from him is that, like, it's just extremely, extremely difficult in the last phase. I think they've made a few comp adjustments, it seems like, recently, kind of emphasizing that, and the amount of time you have to kill him and the time before it basically gets out of control. But I mean, no good guild, when they're on a boss that is killable, wants it to be nerfed before it's killable. You want it to be as hard as possible, increasing your chances, seeing yourself as the best one to be able to deal with that, to kill it. You don't ever want anything to become easier, because what can happen if something becomes easier is if a guild is closer than another on the harder version, and then they nerf it too much or an adequate amount, it becomes the point where, you know, basically any guild could kill it, or it closes that gap. You never want anything that closes that gap as a competitor. So I haven't, like I said, our current progress, I think we pulled it for an hour and a half on Wednesday or something before stopping, and we were at 70 something percent. That's the last time we pulled it. It's been like 5 days, but we paid attention to it. But when we're raiding again tonight in a couple hours, but it's, as far as it feels nerfed going into it, obviously we don't want that. We want to do the boss at its current level, but we don't see this raid really as due to circumstances, haven't seen this raid as a priority. So at the same time, it's like, we just want to get gear for a Shar raid. But yeah, I can tell you almost without speaking for them, of course, officially, but almost can guarantee you that none of them want to see a boss nerfed, unless it's truly like really shitty design, or it's just bad. It's it's something that doesn't work. Then you want that fixed. But if it's just nerfing difficulty, no one really wants that.
Well, I think we've heard across the board with this boss that, you know, whether it was THD, whether it was Josh, whether it was anybody that we've had on the show, I feel like everybody really has this mentality of, yeah, this boss is really hard. It's really hard. We don't know when it's going to go down. You get to the last 30%, you got a full raid boss worth of health left, and it looks like it's going to be difficult to slog through. But everybody likes the design. Everybody likes the challenge. It feels like it really is a Mythic raid made for Mythic raiders. And I don't think any competitor, like you were saying, wants to see that competition broken down in any way. It's been a true competition. It's been a true feat. And I think a lot of people want to see the boss go down in the style. Now, as much as you said it's 5 days since you pulled the boss last, and last night you actually had to go in and do your residuum splits for getting ready for 8.2. So do you think that the nerfs are dramatic enough that it lessens the gap to the point that with all of the days that you're behind, you guys have a shot of taking this one down world first?
Almost certainly not. I for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think we're over 500 pulls behind.
Yeah.
Also, just in general, we wouldn't be day rating from here on out. So you're adding that disadvantage plus also the rating like 10 hours less a day kind of thing, because we're only doing it in the nighttime. So no, I don't. I mean, again, anything's possible, but that's entirely unrealistic. No, I mean, yeah. It would have to be something where, like, we were raiding and then they're like, oh yeah, the boss's health is also nerfed by 30% or something ridiculous like that, for that to ever be possible. So no, I'm almost certainly not. No.
Important to bring up, but yeah, I kind of expected that would be the answer. Even THD, when he was on the show, before we saw these hotfixes come in, he felt like for most guilds that he was looking at in the competition, this was a boss that was going to take 600, maybe even 700 pulls to be able to take down. And I think he feels like even though you guys have been able to keep a critical eye on it, there's still a huge amount of practice that you guys do need to get on the boss. No huge surprise there. Now I'm going to ask you a question that you probably can't answer yet, but I do want to put you on the spot and see what you're thinking right now. And if you can't say anything, that's totally fine. Last time when we watched the race in BOD, you guys did a fantastic job, but you guys were the secret team. We didn't know what was going on. I was casting that with Bay. I was casting that with Tettles. JB was like, we were all there. And
yeah, usually when we gave any information, it was just deception and misleading. Yeah, it was the literal opposite of being open. And yeah,
exactly. And it was fun though, right? And I kind of feel like Pieces has taken the role this time with this raid, with this raid tier. And Pieces, we know for the most part, we don't expect them to ever be streaming in the future. For you guys, you stream in this one because you take it a little bit less seriously. You know what you're working with. You know that the race may not be something that you can go all in on the way that you did in VOD, and 8.2 might be the next real race for you. Everybody was excited to watch you guys stream. I know I was watching your streams from the day that you guys actually started. I was hopping over to yours. I was in THDs. It was a whole bunch of fun. Do you guys think that when you get to 8.2, even though it's a race that you're going to be taking a lot more seriously, are you going to be streaming?
So I guess good and bad news. The good news would be that we haven't officially talked about it. I can tell you the reasons why or why not briefly, but I've always been on the side of, making limit. Like, I mean, we do as much as we can in this guild to make this serviceable, and like you keep doing this regardless of how much time you commit or characters. Like, we just want the best players at all times, and in doing that, we usually make people's requirements, or in quotes, in this guild very, very low. So due to that, people, just that nature is like, I really want this guild to be a place that people want to stay in regardless of how much they can play, and being that, you want the guild to be what they want it to be. So if you're looking at a raid and like they're like, if they're like, our only goal is to get world first, obviously with the time advantage and streaming the day ahead, like that's just only hurting that. And sometimes that's just a bottom line with people. Like, our goal is to get world first. Streaming doesn't affect that. Also, streaming is massively different for different people. I mean, you can distribute the wealth that comes in, absolutely, in either. There's many ways to do that. But it's not as easy as, oh well, you could just turn on your streams, have as many viewers as method, and everyone will make a bunch of money, and you're helping people. It's not that simple. You don't have nearly the amount of fans and things like that. So there's a lot of reasoning to and for it. But I will tell you that at least among the guild, the streaming experience this time was very positive. A lot of people got a lot of viewers and recognition, and some people in the guild have even considered full-time streaming, and they haven't in the past, and I think that's really cool. I always want that for people. But I mean, well, we'll have to see and talk about it. I thought it was enjoyable. I definitely liked. I mean, how you guys saw us stream is exactly how we are all the time. We just and that's even more to like why we don't necessarily have a huge drive to become an organization with a bunch of sponsors. Is we're really just a bunch of idiots playing games. Like, we just have fun. Like, really, that's it. Like, we're very good, but we have we take it as seriously as it needs to be. And although, I mean, a few things about that. Number one, this raid, obviously we took less seriously. It would probably, the atmosphere would be very close to that, but maybe not as lax with some of the mistakes that were happening. But, generally speaking, that's how we are. And yeah, I don't know. It could happen. I don't have an answer to say yes or no. It definitely could happen, but I don't know whether it will or not. I would almost lean towards probably not, but then again, I would always be going forward, and it depends on the rest of the guild. But I know that this experience was definitely good, and people enjoyed it, and it didn't really affect anyone. It was fine.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of the interesting things. I think it's really easy for a lot of us as viewers to just be like, just stream, forehead, right? Because we obviously want to watch it. The reasons behind wanting to see that stream are very real and very obvious. But when you look at all the different things, I know we were kind of even talking about it. And JB, I feel like you can talk about this a little bit, because there is so much, and obviously it's a little bit different for you because you're streaming different content. But when you're looking at a raid, for example, and one person's role is to potentially die during certain parts, or they're taking on added risk by having to deal with a certain mechanic, viewers are going to be like, you died again, idiot. Wow, you stink. Wow, I could do this. Blah 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 blah.
Why is that question directed to me, Rich? Somebody has to die on stream, so this is the question directed to JB?
Well, I thought we were supposed to pick whoever died the most for this question. I felt like that would be like the most realistic. It would be the best answer. I don't know. I just sorry, didn't mean to do it. But in all seriousness, like, what are some of the reasons that you die sometimes on stream? It's because you're trying different things out. It's because you're doing, like, no, all jokes aside, right? Like, you are trying to figure out different timings. You're trying to figure out where you can be greedy, what the right play is, and to so many people, stuff like that becomes a meme. And if you're not a full-time streamer, that can really weigh on your conscience and actually make you make the wrong decisions potentially when you're racing.
Yeah, certainly that's a thing that, well, let me preface this and say that in some ways I feel like when I started streaming like Progression or Mythic Plus, in some ways I felt like in certain situations it made me a better player because you have that, like, sometimes you'll do dumb stuff during like a Mythic Plus or in a raid. You'll try to get away with something like sloppy play because you're like, nobody's watching, nobody's looking over my shoulder watching me do this stuff. So like if I cheat and I'm supposed to dispel, like I'm a healer and I see a dispel come out, I'm like, one of the other healers will get that. I'm going to keep DPSing. And when you're streaming, everyone's watching you, so you're like, oh, geez, I need to get that dispelled. Like everyone's going to call me out if I don't. So in some ways it does help, but there are other times where, in the MDI setting, for instance, it's very difficult to know without having access to like comms or practice to necessarily know what the strategy is for the group. And you'll see a mistake happen, or you'll see the pull go wrong, and it's tough to know why it went wrong. And then someone will die, and the most obvious thing at that point is to go, the healer should have healed him and he didn't because he sucks. So that must have been the reason. Or like you'll see, like we did, I know, for instance, in this last MDI, we did a pull where we dragged a bunch of trash onto a boss, and there's supposed to be a kick that goes out like instantly to prevent an AoE ability from just like, decimating your group. And we missed the kick right out of the gate. Like just instantly, as soon as the pull starts, boom, the entire group takes, like a third of their health and damage on what's already going to be a very difficult pull. And then we end up having deaths. And if you don't know that kick was supposed to be gotten by somebody, you just look at it and go, man, they must have practiced this pull 20 times. How does this healer not know that this damage is coming and is prepared for it? Like, how is he going to screw this up? And it's like, no, that's not the way it was supposed to go. Like there was a kick and he missed. No, this is not me, it's him. And so yeah, there's definitely that when you're in Progression. Now, if you're streaming comms, it's a little bit different because then people, I think, do have, they see what was supposed to happen. They can hear instantly after the fact. Like part of the problem with the MDI is I don't get the opportunity to, like, after the wipe, go like, excuse me, let me interrupt the broadcast here and like let everyone know this was not my fault. This was somebody else's fault. This was not me. This was one of the rogues, Mr. Kick. But if you're streaming Progression with comms on, then you can hear that someone go like, all right, dude, who just missed that kick? Because this was not me. I want my audience to know that. So yeah, like definitely it is it does add a different take to it.
I know if I was still casting the MDI, I probably would have laughed and blamed it on you. If I had the opportunity, out of love, I probably would have done that for you, dude. I always got your back. Now, I do want to, before we full on talk about everything with the MDI, because I'm really excited to talk to you guys about it, I kind of want to still look at the raid a little bit. And I think looking at what Gingy really has seen with his guild is going to be something that's interesting, because all of a sudden we're seeing people from Method who maybe competed in the MDI now move into the raid, and they may have less pulls on Unod, maybe even several hundred less pulls on Unod, and they're trying to fill those roles of people who either have to go to work or just simply knew that those raiders were going to be rotated. And what's that experience been like for Method moving some new fresh faces into Unod?
Well, I don't think you need that many pulls to catch up to the players that has several wipes, because I feel like, let's say you've mentioned and they've done like 200, 300 wipes, you probably only need like maybe 20 to 25 to catch up to where they were, because they've spent a lot of time like progressing phase 1, progressing phase 2, and all you gotta redo is like, okay, I'm using my cooldowns here, and just trying to figure out like where exactly you're using every single cooldown, what ads you need to use it on, etc., etc. So I think you catch up pretty quickly if you've been behind.
Do you think it's one of those things too? Because I think one of the first things that may pop into a lot of people's minds, it's like, well, we got the boys over at Limit that are going to be getting a bunch of pulls in. Why can't they catch up? Do you think it's one of those things that when you're actually in a raid group with a bunch of people who have the experience, you kind of learn it?
there's a difference between 20 people learning the fight versus getting 2 people in. It's a big difference.
What's that feel like? Because I feel like a lot of us maybe have experienced that where you're out of the raid for a week or two, and then you come in and you're learning the fights on the fly, and even if you screw up, something goes down. But not many people have probably experienced it in a progression mythic environment. What is that like to be that player slightly behind? Is there a little bit less pressure on you when you're messing up in the first few pools because it's expected, or is there more pressure and you're like, wow, I really don't want to let the guild down and bring us like a half hour behind where we should be?
Well, I think a good guild wouldn't like flame a guy that comes in after they have been practicing for 500 pulls, and he maybe wipes the raid maybe once or twice, making mistakes that they've made like 80 times already. I mean, I think that's expected for a player that just comes in after being benched.
I think also that I think just in general, with anyone who has done the fight or hasn't done the fight, there are some mechanics that are very difficult, and having someone new mess them up is probably likely.
Yeah.
But I think just in general, the whole like, no one's going to get flamed for messing up something one time that they're learning how to deal with it. A lot of times when you're doing stuff as a raid, how good you are as a guild is how long or early it takes for your worst player or the person who's struggling with the mechanic the most to get good at it. That's like really where you really start seeing meaningful progression. So I think the general thing is this: you just don't want to see the same person making the same mistake 2 times. That's when it starts becoming a problem, I think, and that goes for people in the raid or freshly coming in.
I know with how I lead my guild, sometimes that isn't always the case, and I really should probably reassess that. Sometimes I just feel like we're playing for determination stacks in LFR, and I do think we need to change our mentality a little bit and catch up to the minds of limited method. Now, Tettles, I feel like we haven't gotten to really talk that much since London. I actually remember the last time we really got to talk was right before the MDI, and I think it was like you, me, and Rev, and I was like, I'm gonna compete, man. I'm gonna compete. And now I haven't done anything but like eat donuts every day and play with my dog. I don't think I've played WoW. Like I've only watched people play WoW. So you've had a very different experience. You've been kind of the master of everything that's going on in the Mythic world, getting to watch a lot of these teams firsthand, also getting your first chance to really be on the desk on that broadcast. I know that London was your first big chance to get to cast, and we got to spend a lot of time together. It was a whole bunch of fun. So what's that experience been like for you?
So the MDI, like after the London thing, has been a pretty large learning experience. There's been a lot. It's been like, so we're in a big broadcast studio out in Columbus, Ohio. So I've been flying back and forth every weekend because I still have to go to. So there's been a lot of travel involved. But beyond that, the experience overall has been super nice. I haven't had enough time to really raid either. I'm still, I don't know, maybe 120 pulls deep on Cabal, but I've been watching Unot, and overall the raid looks good. Just seeing all the teams compete in the MDI has also been super, super great, and I've been enjoying the whole entire time.
Is the travel getting you at all? It's always funny when I hear somebody who's like new to casting me like, yeah, it's a lot of travel. Like, is the travel getting to you?
The itself was not that bad. Having to flip my sleep schedule for East Cup weekends every other weekend has been kind of rough.
Yeah. That's not something that happens very often for one show. I think that's something that's very unique to how the Mythic tournament has been run, how the Mythic Dungeon International has been run, but you get used to it. You definitely do over time. How is the schedule for somebody who's like competing in it, JB? Like, are they basically just trying to cater to the player schedules to make sure that you guys are as comfortable as possible when you're actually racing?
Well, there's kind of a new twist this year. You know, last year you had the 4 regions: China, APAC, EU, and Americas, and each region had its own weekend. And they gave us a lot of practice time in the last tournament. Like I think NA went last. We had like a month of practicing, which I think Blizzard realized induces a lot of burnout. When you have that much time to just practice with no actual tournament, it gets very difficult to just, every day, like, okay, I guess we'll practice again for the 3rd week in a row. So this time around, they have limited it to, you get, 2 days notice of what the affixes and dungeons are going to be, and it makes the practice window a lot smaller, which I think most players enjoy. Like, I think having that limited practice time keeps it much more manageable and feels less oppressive. Though the scheduling has been a bigger deal this time around because they've started combining the regions. So like we now play, North America now plays with Europe, and that means that the broadcast starts pretty early in the US, and it also means that it goes pretty late in Europe. And so it ends up, by trying to get both regions included, it ends up making it kind of nasty for both regions in one way or another. Like if you're the first game of the day in North America, it's, you're basically waking up and going right into the dungeon.
9:30 a.m.
Yeah. And if you're the last game in EU, if you're like the like lower bracket last game of the day in EU, you're playing well after midnight. So it's kind of difficult to keep it.
And usually gamer degenerates wake up around like 3 or 4 in the afternoon by large. So the early mornings are really.
Yeah, I feel like that's always kind of one of those things it's really difficult to line it all up, because even like you look at PvP, right, and how they've decided to do it. I think as a viewer, the schedule is perfect. Like, I think it's so good to kind of have both of the tournaments combined on one weekend, and to have that element of, you get 2 grand finals on one day. I think it's one of the best formats you can potentially have as a viewer, but inevitably when time zones come into play, it's going to be something that is really hard to juggle for everybody, and it's definitely kind of part of being a player that is tough at times. But speaking of time zones and trying to include all of that, did you guys feel any strain this year with the idea that, this tier, with the idea that there is still that time discrepancy? I know, Max, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, talking about like, what if this raid was just blown out of the park? What would the community actually say? We all know that a lot of people assume that the boss was going to be tuned in a way where everybody thought, completely wrong, that you guys were going to be able to log on and probably destroy these 2 bosses before EU even had a chance at it. That's not the case. Because of that, has nobody really talked about the start time difference?
I'm not sure. I'm sure if we were able to really go for this, that the conversations around, I assure you, today and yesterday would have been all about us getting a reset in this raid. Obviously, the reset in this raid doesn't really matter. In fact, I would imagine a lot of guilds that are going for it will probably extend. We won't, because obviously we want the Cabal loot for Ashara potentially. But you would have been here. I can get, like, exactly. If we were raiding last night, the narrative would have been Blizzard nerfs the boss after Method goes to sleep while Limit is still raiding X amount of. It absolutely would have been a conversation. But obviously, with us taken out of it, there's not much of a conversation to be had. I mean, why do you think you never heard anything about the 16-hour advantage before we started going for World Versus expansion? You didn't hear it at all, because it wasn't relevant. So it would probably be being talked about, but also maybe not. I'm not sure. It seems, it just basically, it largely comes from that now the world first race is so streamlined and everyone gets access to it, which is great. It's awesome. But it also involves a lot of people that, are now huge fans of the world first race, but have never rated at that level or even have any idea of how it works. So they don't, it's a lot of it's just like Twitch chat philosophy kind of thing.
Well, it's also just like, I'm not gonna lie, being somebody who spends a lot of time in Twitch chat, I know I like to just make people angry, right? Like, I like to go in and be like, yo, Pieces is 9 out of 8, like, you idiots, what are you doing? Like, I really enjoy doing that. Some people call it toxic. I think it's a really good time. But Trekkie had a genuinely good idea when he was on the show, and I kind of want to hear the perspective of somebody in Method and somebody in Limit on this right now, and what you guys actually think. The Trekkie basically said, what if there was a server in EU that had any reset times, right? So it was an EU server, it was located in EU, you wouldn't have any of the ping, but the reset would be on Tuesday. And then maybe we could have a world where some of those guilds that are progressing, like Method in EU for World First, maybe even guilds like Pieces, would be on that server. They would have the reset at the same time as NA. And then, okay, all of a sudden we don't have that reality of it going backwards and anybody could get on the server. Like, how would you feel about something like that, Max, and the guys in Limit, if all of a sudden that wasn't a talking point?
I wish it was. I mean, I have been the entire time as much of an advocate for that for any other reason, because I think it affects our ability to stream. It affects entirely the opinion of people looking at the race. Because, I mean, actually, I'll go ahead and give a shout out to a video I think Method made. Kana kind of headed it. It was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago, about like their opinion, or just trying to give an explanation to people about the time difference between us and Method. And it was like, I mean, I completely agreed with everything he said. Makes complete sense. I don't know if you guys want to link that in the chat. It's on the Method YouTube channel, but that
For
like
sure.
that like 100% explains all of that from their perspective and our perspective. Like I completely agree with it. But yeah, I mean, I'm as much of an advocate for that as anyone, because it is really, really annoying to deal with. And obviously we have no way around it. I understand people are like, well, why don't you wait until 2 a.m. and start your raids at 2 a.m. to start at their time? It's like, I don't think you understand how ridiculously shitty that is. But like, yeah, no, believe me. I mean, even to further on what he said, what about a a tournament realm almost, where I mean, I'll speak for them. I guarantee you every single person in Method and Limit would be okay with this and want this. If there was like a tournament realm that you could qualify for on live, so there would still be a reason for it. And you have it start at the same time. You have either set times or not set times, but give everyone access to it at the same time. Everyone has the same gear. You can swap to classes with other classes of perfect gear. It's just the perfect like creative optimization for what you can do in a raid, and it's not held back by a bunch of chore-like grinding and things like that. And it would encourage a lot of competition and potentially encourage more guilds to go for it with all of that involved, and not needing absolute excessive amount of things that Method and Limit both did before Dazarlor. And as far as farming, it was insane. It was literally insane. You saw all of us tweet every day how much we despised what was happening. And then people will say like, well, if you hate it, why don't you do it? And it's like, that's another thing where like people don't understand, watching from a non-perspective of never having done this before. Even guilds that raid 5 hours a night and are very good, and not understanding the difference between the two things is, you don't ever want to put yourself at a disadvantage. It could potentially be a huge disadvantage to do that, and then you're putting in all this time for nothing. So in a way, you have to. It's not like something you can just choose to not do. There's a reason.
Max, don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me. I think this might trigger everybody in Mythic raids right now, but this is just my personal opinion. I don't think it should be on the tournament realm. So there are a few reasons I don't think it should be on the tournament realm. As of right now, it's first of all not like a Blizzard sponsored or Blizzard ran tournament, which I think is, as much as there isn't. I would like some support from Blizzard potentially in the future. I don't mind the fact that this isn't a like. I like when the community runs a tournament, because you could do so many different things. Like, watch this. Hit. I'm not in trouble. Like, you can do a lot of different things, right? And you can also like derive personalities in different ways. Like, you have a lot of freedom, and the community can run the tournament that they want to run. And I think that that's something that's fantastic. And I think that any healthy game has two sides to its viewership. One's community and the other is Blizzard. I think Blizzard's done a fantastic job with what they're doing with the MDI. And I think the PvP tournament, which obviously I'm a part of, I also think that that's done a fantastic job this year. I want to see them grow more, and I also want to see the community side of things grow. The other reason that I don't want to see it on a tournament realm is because I think that if you are a Mythic Raider, part of it is what gear can you get, the ridiculous ways to get gear, the ridiculous amounts of farming. And I love watching you guys stream that. Like, I like that side of things. I like watching the opera of people trying to get BOEs, the opera of like somebody finding the break in the system and like getting away with something in the game. And I know how hard it is for you guys. But the reason I know how hard it is for you guys is because I've watched you do it, and I've watched that frustration, and I haven't had to do it. And I love watching somebody do things like that. I like watching the frustration, and I respect what you guys do. And if that got taken out of the World First Race, I think I would be disappointed.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a degenerate opinion, Rich. That is a degenerate opinion.
Well,
it's actually disgusting to hear it.
One of the worst things is the farm rates and the split rates in between tiers, which would obviously go away if we had tournament rooms. That would be the best thing about it. But at the same time, if it was going to be like a tournament setting, and Blizzard would make a tournament out of it, there needs to be, like, imagine it's not like a 5-man tournament or a 3-man tournament. It's 20 to 28 people, depending on how large a roster you have. And the prize pool would have to be immense for it to even be worth it. Compared to just having it be a community thing and just streaming it. So I'm all up for a global release. In my opinion, that's what I would like, and I would be fine with that personally.
I think if it did happen, they would have to do it like Fortnite style, right? Like, I like how Fortnite runs some of their tournaments where everybody can stream POVs and things like that.
I think in general, the whole tournament realm idea is more hyperbole as far as talking about like Trekkie's opinion on how that should be done. I mean, it's basically like, yeah, I want that, but it could even be more. I just think everyone wants it to be as fair as possible. But yeah, I mean, it's completely unrealistic, because I mean, they're not going to set up a tournament realm and make all these things for the world first race, which they openly endorse as something that is something created by the community, and they don't deal with. Method will have hundreds of thousands of viewers at times combined between all the streams during like an actual raid race, and they'll be promoting like a pet battle streamer on the launcher or something. It's not something that they find as a priority, and whether that's right or wrong, I mean, I'm too stupid to know, but for sure they definitely don't see it as something as what they want to do. So yeah, they won't do that. And also a criticism I've heard of that idea is that it'll make all the players who compete for this not even want to play live and just want to play tournament realm, which is true, because talk to anyone on the MDI, playing on the tournament realm is infinitely better than playing on live. So it's for the MDI. So I mean, there's no way to do it, but I think some effort to make it more on the same side of everyone being on the same playing field is always going to be good.
It's funny because there are times in history when Tournament Realm was like very easy to access for anybody. You used to buy, I forget what it was called. I want to call it a battle pass, but I might just be like super Pepega right now and calling it what it's called for it. But you would buy this was all the way back in BC and it lasted for a little while. Each season you could buy a Tournament Realm pass and you could go and you could create a character at max level. You could get all the gear and you could queue arena. And it was like a thing people did. And I remember for a period of time, the only time I would ever do arena was on these tournament realms. And ultimately they decided that it was something that took people off of the live servers. And then, when I was casting the MDI, I spent a lot of time on the tournament environment instead of on the live environment. It is something that happens time and time again. I think splitting up the player base can be a bad thing. And also, as much as it's a degenerate point of view, I really do like watching people work really hard and do something that most people can't do. I think it's so incredible to watch, even if it is infuriating. I know JD like really laid into me there, but I do think it's like watching an opera. And it is watching something that you can't do, and it's watching people be fantastic at the game, even if sometimes it is like, is a split run, does it take a crazy amount of skill? No, but it takes an amount of dedication that I have never had to a single thing in my entire life.
I also enjoy watching miserable people do slave. That's like basically what you're saying. It's so
I
bad,
think that's honestly, that's what I think. I don't think you enjoy watching people do residuum. I think you enjoy watching people hate like themselves on stream and like just, why am I doing, just, oh, this is so mind-numbing.
Questioning
and it's
just, your life.
Yeah, like you can watch them and be like, at least my life is better than this guy doing split runs. Like, I just had an awful day. Like my dog crapped on the floor and, I got like a parking ticket, but at least I don't have to run 6 split runs for residuum. And like, that's just, you can just, sit down in your chair and feel better than someone.
I mean, the projected numbers for residuum, they said they're not going to reset it, but they said they're going to blow it out of proportion so it won't be usable. And the number given was 40,000. You know how quick it will be to get to 40,000 doing as much as you can do? You can get so much. You can get thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands a week on one character. Yeah. And
residuum is a terrible system. It flat out is a bad system. I hope
it could be okay. I mean, I really like the idea of you being able to target Azret you want. I think that system is great. I think the way that their communication about it, at least this time, they just told us it's not going to reset. Going into Battle for Desolor, both Limit and Method were both screaming like, hey, let us know what's going to happen. Because like they easily could have just been like, oh, well, we're going to make it cost this. And we would have done all of that for nothing and have no idea. So the communication about it was obviously initially horrible, but I think the system is good. It's just that even if it meant we couldn't get, like, just make it not be able to get mythic pieces for the first couple weeks or something, like just something where it's not, I mean, I'm obviously biased. I don't want to do an insane amount of work for very little benefit. I'd rather just not have to do that and have it be fair.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about?
Again, like, it's the Wolfers Raiders are the minority. We're like not everyone. Like the big part of WoW's player group is not trading Residium, and that's like Blizzard's point, right? They don't want to cater to the Wolfers Raiders at all. But I think it would be an easy fix. I think it should just be like a personal thing. So like once you trade Azret gear away, it no longer grants you Residium.
Yeah, while they shouldn't be catering to like the world first race, they should also kind of respect your guys' opinions on things as well, because you guys have such like an influence on the community's perception of how the game is too. Because nobody wants to watch like people run island expeditions and do world
Rich
quests.
does.
Okay.
Well, I actually, so to chime in on that, I think it's been better to watch in different life cycles of the game. I do think right now, if Residuum was a system that, even if I have to watch you guys be miserable, because that's the content I pay for as a sub, every now and then I donate $1 just to hear you guys saying my name. I love it. I love it. That's why I watch. But the thing is when you look at Residuum for the average player, I personally, and I could be completely wrong, and we could hear people in the chat say the other thing, I don't think the system feels particularly good for me as a player either. I think it's better than what we had initially, but I would much rather have something that's similar to a badge system of the past. And I think that it's more intuitive in a lot of ways. I think that watching how gear funnels and also having the capability of doing it makes you feel like you're getting far behind if you don't do it, right? And it puts a lot of stress on people, even with how personal loot works. Like when you're inside of a raid, even if it's pug, you're constantly whispering people, and the gear economy has become like, hey, can I get that? And it's annoying. It's actually annoying to raid with pugs and just getting like whispering people, like looking at everybody who gets loot, whispering them and trying to like flirt with them so they'll give you gear, and then you get a piece of gear and you're getting guilted into potentially giving it to someone. Like, if you have personal loot as a system, don't make us all turn into beggars. It just, I don't know. I don't like how it feels. Like, some people literally have add-ons that automatically whisper everybody who gets a piece of loot that they can use. Just automatically whispers them, can I get that?
Do you need?
I like that.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And like, I have that add-on. Like, because
Fuck it hell.
I mean, you're losing a competitive advantage if you don't.
I mean, yeah, but you're definitely preaching to the choir here. I don't think anyone here is going to advocate personal loot being a good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Why?
Why? Because I'm a healer.
He's a Mythic Plus player is why. And he doesn't normally get loot.
I'm a healer. Do you know how oppressed my people have been throughout the entirety?
I tanked for a long time, man. It's
people.
the same. It's fine. I'd do it any day. It's just, well, obviously I also am biased towards being someone who's like giving out loot in a guild, right? So I don't want to be doing progress and have healers and tanks getting loot over DPS. It just makes no sense, and you can't avoid it.
Yeah, I bring up the story of how my guild started to fall apart with how some of the personal loot stuff works, like a few times. I do think that it still has a level of strain on the person who's the loot master, right? Because somebody still becomes the loot master. Like in your guild, I feel like it's very different. I actually feel like that's one of the ways that Mythic Raiders are different, because you're playing for something besides loot a lot of the time, where some average players play for loot to a certain degree.
Well, you're totally right. I think in general, I think one thing that always kind of shocks people when they hear us stream and hear us talk about stuff is that, you know, you always have a couple, and every guild has a different community. You have a different 20 plus people, and there are people who like different things. There's nothing wrong with liking getting loot and that being why you want to play the game. It's actually one of the reasons people play MMOs. It's like character progression. Like, it makes sense. And there's nothing, but like when you get to a level where like you're in either of our guilds, it's talking about what you care about for doing progression is like, you just want the best for progression. I can honestly tell you that there's not a single person in our guild, and hasn't been for a long time. There used to be, certainly, but like there's not a single person that like would want to hold on to a piece of loot because they got it. Because I mean, genuinely, no one cares about getting a piece of loot in this game. And it didn't used to be like that. And obviously you evolve as a player in this game the longer you play it and for what you want. But like, you just want your raid to have the most gear. And I think that, but again, that's very biased, because I know that most guilds are not like that. Every other guild I've ever been in has been nothing like that. There's always at least a few people, if not the majority of the opinions are people wanting to get more gear.
For sure. I mean, Gingy can probably even, I don't even know if he remembers this, but one of the first times that Gingy and I were actually in the same place was during one of the raid races. And as soon as the boss dies, I like ran up to him, like, you get anything cool? And he was pretty much like, I don't care. He's like, it's more of a chore to make
especially
sure that
after the boss dies. Yeah, it's like, who could ever care?
Yeah, I ran up to him. First thing, I was like, yo, what'd you get? He's like, a boss kill, right? And there is that level of caring way more about the
I did care about the mount. That's I hope I got it, but I didn't. Besides that, no.
Yeah, see, and that's a different mentality that I think a lot of people probably aren't as familiar with. And it's definitely interesting to talk about. But let's talk about MDI just a little bit more. Tettles, let's talk about what it's been like.
Hold on, Rich. I think before we talk about the MDI, before the boss gets mad at us, we have to wiggle this around. You keep talking about loot, and I wanted to
Oh,
show.
I can't read.
You
Yeah,
can't.
sorry. I can't.
Yes, it's fine. We know it's all right.
I can't read in this glass cage of emotions today.
No, you're totally fine. I have the VOD from earlier, which I have queued up in Discord for anyone that wants to follow along as well. We can sync it up here shortly after the hot fixes today, which if you didn't hear, there were more hot fixes today. Nerfs essentially on Unat, where the Crown of Tempest does 20% less damage to players, and the time interval between the unending hunger casts in phase 3 is now 45 seconds, up from 30, essentially meaning you went from 2 hungers a minute to about 1.25 a minute, which is pretty huge. And the best pull that I actually am watching Scripe right now, because they just pulled their almost 600th pull. And I want to bounce over, I want to bounce over to their live feed real fast. Let's jump into the cockpit, because you never know what might happen right now. Otherwise, I do have the VOD queued up as well. But they had a long talking session. I've been sort of looking back and forth at this on the other monitor to see, like, when are they going to pull? And then all of a sudden, the 30-second pull timer went up about 8 minutes ago. And I wanted to jump in here because they were just about to get to 20%.
Okay, let's take a peek.
The one interesting thing about this is that I don't know, to go off what Max said earlier, I think a lot of the roster swaps, or some of them you've seen today, aren't exactly what they had intentionally planned, but they are based on the available roster because of work. And obviously we've lasted another week, so there's some small changes there, because some people can no longer stay because they have other responsibilities to get back to in the IRL MMO.
Yeah, typically we have, like, I think it's the same for Method. You basically allot a 1 week for the raid. 2 weeks is kind of a thing of the past, because, like, very rarely, although this raid is different because the reset doesn't really matter, but in most raids,
right,
I think the longest a raid would ever live is like 9 days, 8 days, 9 days.
Do you prefer
Max,
that?
Than it being longer?
Do you prefer like the 9-day, 10-day stuff as opposed to like the 2 full reset stuff that we saw like in Nighthold?
Yes. The raiding that long, I mean, one, it's literally not doable for us, so maybe that might feel differently. But if we,
I can imagine.
Dang. This was.
I do want to.
Oh, I was saying that just to commentate on the live feed here with Scripe. That is a planned death, I believe they have, around 20% when he has the Tempest Caller, but they had the same tank death problem there. And since they're running into an issue with how many ads that are up, and then the death touch effect from the crowd hitting,
I think that's something you're definitely going to see with this comp, especially is. I understand why they 3 heal, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons they swapped in the Druid over the Shaman, is that if you're running 2-disc Shaman, your tank healing is I mean, that's literally the worst tank healing comp in the game.
right?
And it's a fight with a ton of tank healing, and it's also from 2 tanks that require a lot of while they are more stable, they do require a lot more healing. So I know that they were like running into that. Swapping in the Resto Druid helps a lot, because Resto Druid legit carries at such a high level, on Brewmaster specifically. So I think like at least seeing that change made a lot of sense. Like the changes they made today are actually, I don't know if it was entirely based off work, but I think swapping in the Druid is probably, from how much damage the tanks were taking, is probably really good.
I do want to ask you one more time, for anybody who's just tuning in and maybe didn't hear us at the beginning of the show talk about the changes that did go live. How big of an impact do you think it is going to have on the boss being taken down, Max?
What, the nerfs or the comp changes?
The nerfs themselves.
Oh, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of, like, I heard that the other change of the effect of the timings of the lasers, I don't know if that made it easier or harder. From what I heard from someone, though, is that it was a little annoying because they had to basically relearn P3. There was just entirely different timings, and that's kind of, annoying. However, the other nerf was, I don't know how, like, at least it's basically a damage burn in the last phase, but it's 40% of the boss's health. Just to give you an idea, I think the last phase in here of this boss is 20 million more health than all 4 bosses on Conclave combined. Like it's an insane amount of health on one target, and you also have to dot. And I believe you kill ads halfway through. Just briefly watching it now while we've been doing this, it's it's just a ton of damage, and I mean them nerfing it, because it's basically a soft enrage is what they nerfed. They nerfed the insatiable, or whatever that was called, torment. It went from 2 debuffs every minute to
just over one. Yeah, it's
just over one. It's almost nerfing it in half. So yeah, it's pretty huge, I imagine.
Yeah.
Tettles, you wanted to weigh in? What were you going to say?
I said that I was agreeing with what Max. Well, I was going to agree with what Max was saying, that it ended up having to change like a lot of the strategies that people were initially doing in phase 3, and forced them to start to relearn it. So it was like a real equalizer to any of like maybe the top 5 guilds that might be looking to try to push for a world first kill. And like Max was saying, like earlier on in the broadcast, any nerf, especially to the very bottom part of the like all the phases, like this is like only a nerf to phase 3 realistically, and it really equalizes it, and it turns it into a lot of who ends up raiding more hours sometimes, just because of kind of depending on when you can raid. Because if Limit was pushing for it, and if Limit had more time to raid like post nerf, then they would have like a significantly higher advantage. But Max, what exactly do you think about like major nerfs to fights like mid world first progression like this? Like we actually saw some on Jaina, just like some changes, not necessarily nerfs, with like they changed the elemental for a little bit, and then they changed the intermission stacking stuff, but then they changed that.
Well,
back.
the only nerfs they did twice were on Jaina, were nerfing something that they broke or tried to fix for the wrong reason. For example, the 4 stacks in the intermission, that happened in the middle of our raid or right after a dinner break, and it was like, okay, like and that was, I mean, that made that phase insane. You had to skystep everyone. You had to you had to run potentially an extra healer. It was insane. And then they nerf it, and it's like that waste, all of the time you spend raiding was basically wasted. Like
it was a full wasted day. I remember because Method, I think Methods brought an extra Resto Druid, and like you said, everybody was skystepping. It was like a completely different strat.
No, it was crazy.
It
was
dumb.
almost undoable. It was crazy, but it was doable. But it was like basically that day, at least for us, would like we had been okay into P2, and like we just were not able to progress in P2 very well because the damage then, at least like with one less healer, like if anything went wrong, it was a little behind. So I think and then the other change was well, there's also another thing. They ended up buffing the boss. They made the boss do like double the tank damage that it was doing, and that was about that same time. And then they also made the change where they nerfed the water, or they buffed the water rally to cast at 100 energy, which was able to be dealt with. You had to pull it out, but it was really, really shitty because it like just gave your tanks actually, everything about it was bad. And then they ended up changing that back. They also did something else as well. They, like, at least when we had gone into our second strat, the non-burn strat, one of the things about it was we lusted twice in that phase by giving someone sated before the pull, and we were able to block the boss, and she would not, anytime you blocked the boss in the last phase, she would not cast Frozen Orb, which basically is either something that hits the wall and kills you, or it's something that gives the entire raid 2 stacks, taking 20 seconds off of your burn time. And we were able to block her twice and ignore 2 of those, and then they also changed that on the last day. So they were
wow.
So they do a lot of stuff like that. And as far as how I feel about it, assuming the boss is tuned very well, and it's like it's very killable. Now keep in mind that that's not always the case at all. Like there's a decent chance that that doesn't happen and like stuff goes wrong. So it's as long as it's tuned correctly, no one wants to have any changes. You want to kill it the way it is. You don't want things to change in the middle of progression, unless it's a change to something that's really annoying or bad. And it's not bad like in a difficulty way. It's bad like the design is bad and it makes you do something really shitty to deal with it. Like that's okay, but I don't know. Yeah. I haven't done the boss enough. Sorry.
As a casual raider, I have to say every time that a new boss comes out and I hear someone from Limit or Method go, I really like this boss, this is a great boss fight, I go, oh shit.
This is gonna take a lot of pulls.
Anytime one of the progress raiders is like, this is a really good fight, I'm like, nerf it, nerf the shit out, like get rid of this, get rid of every hard thing about this boss, because if they like it, that means we're gonna spend like 1,000 attempts to kill it. I can't stand when
that's
the
a really good point.
like a boss.
Because like look at Cabal. Like Cabal was something where we killed it in like a day, and we're like raving about how good a tuned boss it is, and then you just imagine how many people are like, yo, there's no fucking way we're killing that boss until it's nerfed. And I mean that boss, that was kind of what I was talking about with the compositions earlier, is people look at what top guilds are running and they're like, oh well, we can't run that many warlocks, that many priests, that many shamans, whatever. Like they look at whatever the comp is, and it's like, it's not always the most killable thing. Like a lot of that boss was strategy and what you tried to do where. Like for example, I know Method was, and we were messing with empowering a boss and giving them the 300% damage increase, and either having a brewmaster tank it or having the other person be able to kite the actual casts, because they would live one, even at a triple empower. They would live one, and then you could spell word them, you could pain suppression. You could deal with it, right? And then they buff that, and they're like, no, fuck that. We don't want you to do that, which is fine. But like once you actually have a video for a boss and you know exactly what to do, like you don't have to spend any wipes figuring out how to kill the boss, and you can just deal with it. You really can. You don't need to have the comps of the best guilds. The best guilds are never looking at it like, hey, what can we get away with? What's the worst comp we can run, right? They're thinking, what is the absolute best comp? Like if this class, if this player is really good, you're not thinking like, oh, well, maybe we could get away with getting this. Like, no, you're just going to run the best possible comp to kill any hard boss. Now, this is different in other raids because you want to get gear for, like in Battle of Dazzler, for example, we're trying to get gear for Jaina on every boss. So you basically want to run your Jaina comp on every boss, assuming they need loot, unless the boss is hard enough where you don't. Now we kind of got screwed a little bit by that because we had they didn't change the Jaina block shit, so we were gearing 4 frost mages for the entire raid, and then when we were on the 7th boss or something, they made the hotfix live that wasn't going to work on Jaina anymore after we had already geared them. So that was a little bit of an optimization, but that's the goal. But in a raid like this, 2 bosses where the boss's first loot isn't that good, you're just going to run the best comps. You don't need that many priests and warlocks to kill the boss. It just what the best guilds are going to do to make that doable. Like I really think Cabal is very killable. The Enrage is irrelevant, and it's just about doing it well. But I don't know. I thought the boss was tuned perfectly, but I could understand from any kind of other rating perspective how the boss may be too hard. But I mean, how do you want
well, Mythic Cabal specifically is supposed to be something that's done after Mythic Jaina is dead too, right? So there's kind of like an expectation.
That's one of those contentious points, right? Because that is not what the director of the entire game said, and that is of course 2 different things. Because they had said, yes, linearly, sure.
Who are you going to trust? Tettles or Ian? Who are you going to trust?
I mean,
I'm just saying, that's the problem with the perception of what came out, is that Ian quite literally said it's like Rostakon Mechatork level, and that is obviously not true.
I mean, what are they supposed to do, though? What are they supposed to do, though?
No, I agree.
Like, think about the tune. Like, you basically had any really good guild basically shit on the tuning of Battle of Dazzler bosses before the last boss.
True.
And in my opinion, for us, rightfully so. But I know for a lot of what I do on my stream is talking to raid leaders or just people who raid in all kinds of different skill level guilds. And a lot of guilds struggle with Mechatork and with Blockade. And they're decently hard bosses for them. And that's who they tune the game for. So I can understand it. But also you can see this raid as potentially being a reaction to that. Like, oh, well, they want the bosses to be harder, then sure, here you go. But it's like, that's what we want. I mean, but I understand that we're a very small percentage of the game. And I don't know.
But the heroic and the normal are tuned very well, especially for for heroic and normal raiders. Those bosses are really easy by and large, and then they're not overly punishing for you messing up mechanics at all. But then the mythic it feels like it's an addition to Jaina, and it's something that the mythic raiders go and do after they go and do mythic BOD.
Right. I want to air something.
It's not intended,
I want to air something that we've kind of discussed on the show before, and that's kind of the idea with this 2 boss raid. It has an interesting potential where a lot of the gear is going to be not quite as desirable. It's only a 2 boss raid. It's in between that big drop in 8.2. Is this an opportunity to have a boss that is very much only tuned for the best guilds that are in existence? And think about the enjoyment. I think Josh said this very well. Think about the enjoyment that the hardcore community has gotten out of this. And that doesn't just mean the progression raiders, right? Like, I fall into the hardcore community. And what does that really mean? Like, yeah, you can meme about me playing LFR all you want. It's true. I'm not the best player anymore. I'm definitely not. Why are all of us who are watching the show right now in the hardcore community? Because we watch the streams. Like, we consume more WoW content than most people. And you look at these bosses and we're watching this spectacle, and you see 30,000 people watching the MDI, and then you look at the same exact time, there's another group of people that are 30,000, 50,000 in numbers that are also watching this raid race, and some of us are watching both at the same exact time. That is hardcore, and it's awesome that community exists, and this raid has given us all an opportunity to watch it. And I think a lot of people, even Warcraft devs, tweeted out the hotfixes, and a bunch of people who were not mythic raiders are like, no, don't change it. I've been watching this for 7 days now. I want to see somebody actually manage to kill it. And do you guys think, and we have a bunch of different people play the game in a different way, that it is okay to release, if it is in a raid like this, a boss that is only meant to be killed on its release by those top guilds? Is
No.
that something that is worth it?
No, no
developers
way. If we have as limited developer resources as it sounds like we have at Blizzard right now, if you are releasing content that is designed to be done by like 0.01% of the population, you have so badly missed like the target here. Like if this is designed for the like 400 people in the world that raid in guilds that are capable of doing this, meanwhile we've got like myriad content droughts in the game right now. Like we've got the Azerite system that nobody seems to enjoy. Like the dungeons have had issues for quite like there's been a bunch of bugs in dungeons that have not been addressed despite being known for a very long time.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten any new dungeons. We're going to get Mechagon, but we haven't gotten any new dungeons despite the fact that we're coming up on a year into the expansion. And if you're releasing a raid with 2 bosses that are designed to be killed by less than 1,000 people, like what?
I would even argue.
justify that?
I would even argue less. I at least the last
Yeah,
boss
less, for
before it
sure.
was just nerfed. Now I don't know if there would be any more than about 5 or 6 guilds in the world that could kill that boss before they just nerfed it. Just looking at it, I obviously haven't done the last phase, but
I think there's an interesting side of this too, and I got to bring in like the Bay is a contrarian. They're different teams that work on different things. So I'm pretty sure the raid team that put this together isn't responsible for the other parts of the game that are having
Sure,
content
but
droughts.
redeploy them. Put them somewhere else. Like if
That's
you have an
on them.
entire team developing this for a few hundred people, take them and put them somewhere else.
Yeah.
I also just to jump in on what JB's saying, because when I look at this content, and if all of that other stuff did exist, and you have all of these different difficulties, I do like the idea that Mythic is maybe only for a small group of people, but I definitely agree that a lot of people are feeling the strain in other portions of the game. And I would go as far as to say whoever was designing this portion of the raid is probably some of the best designers that we have working on the game right now. I would love them to touch some content that is played by a large majority of people. I think that is a very fair thing to ask for. And that's coming from somebody who wants to see the game in a place where there can be a boss like this that's only made for those top guilds. JB, if you didn't have problems right now with different things that were happening in dungeons and other content droughts, and you still have LFR, normal, heroic, and mythic, do you think that there's ever a world, like in the ideal utopia Azeroth, do you think that there's a world where there can be a boss designed only for those top end raiders? Like, I'm curious if you ever think that it could exist.
I think that the current system actually allows for that, but it does it sort of backwards. Whereas I think a lot of people look at a boss in a vacuum and decide whether that boss is too easy or too hard based on the tuning of that boss by itself. I think that the current system is actually very well set up for sort of a scaled difficulty based on your item level. And what makes those bosses a lot of times, like what makes a Jaina fight so difficult is that when these top level guilds come in here and start doing it in the first week of progression, they're coming in with eye level that's probably 10 or 15 eye levels behind what is expected to be in to kill this boss. And so they have this handicap that makes the boss much more difficult than it will be in a month or two. And so when those first guilds are getting there, the fight is a lot more difficult for them. By the time the rest of the guilds catch up, they've closed that gear gap, and they have made the fight sort of artificially less difficult by being more geared. So they are, in essence, doing a different fight than the guilds that got there first are doing. Like that phase 3 Jaina DPS check, which was so difficult for guilds like Method and Limit that got there in the first week, when the rest of these guilds are getting there a month later and they've had those several resets of Mythic gear, like all of a sudden that DPS check is much more manageable. You don't have to bring in like 2 Disc Priests and 2 Resto Shamans to push that DPS. You could maybe squeeze in a 5th healer if you absolutely need to, and it makes the fights easier. And I think the current system does a great job of allowing for fights to be difficult for the top guilds if they get there immediately, and then become progressively easier for the rest of the guilds.
I agree. I think the reset that occurs in Battle for Dazzlor with the way how much more gear you can spread out amongst your raid changes so much every week. Where in the past in Master Loot, a bunch of guilds ran splits. This is true for us and any guild. Basically every week that goes by in personal loot, the amount of gear you get even trumps what you got last expansion, because you're getting more gear with personal loot and just more of it becomes tradable. So if you're bringing in those people, the reset has never mattered more. So in a way, he's right that you can have a boss that is basically getting nerfed every week by gear, and if they tune it correctly, you could have the top guilds be doing something that's very, very difficult, and then other people may never have to experience that. I mean, that's literally what it already is. But except for this raid is different because the reset of gear, this raid, it just doesn't matter. The gear isn't good enough in these raids for that to matter. So that's where like kind of like this raid is kind of like a little petri dish of where you can kind of mess around with stuff like that and find a nice medium where they can do that. Because the thing is though is like they've never done anything to make you think that they really want to like appease the high end community. I think the one thing they have done very quietly without a lot of praise is that while the game, whether it's correct or not, has received a lot of criticism for its where it's kind of delved into class design and things like that, and what you have to do outside the game to keep up and the grinding and all that stuff that I don't even want to go into, but you know what I'm talking about. The stuff that they've very quietly done for high-end players and why a lot of us keep playing this game is that the rating has consistently been getting better for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not delved in quality at all. It's been great. I think Battle for Dazzler was like a minor letdown, but Jaina was insane because everyone wanted a couple of those bosses to be insane. But this is like a shining light at the end of the tunnel. This raid, like this raid, almost in a way. I mean, like I said, I'm upset we weren't able to do it. Like it looks so good. Like.
So, some people have said that, at times in Legion, people said I was too positive. In BFA, people have said that I'm too negative, but I definitely do, I guess, complain a lot. I definitely talk about how I feel about the game a lot. But one thing that I have never said in BFA is that even for a second, I was disappointed with encounter design. I think that it's been fantastic. I think that looking at the raids has been great. I think one of the problems for me is the rewards in the raids haven't driven me as a loot hungry player to feel accomplished for doing them. It really is only the kills, and I'm not in a guild right now that's progressing. So when the loot isn't there, I tend to not be there. But Gingy, I'm a little bit, I want to hear about you, how you feel about the encounter design. Do you feel the same way? Are you happy with encounter design? Is this a raid too, where you look at and go, wow, the rest of the expansion may have some really good raids in store for us?
Yeah, definitely. I feel the game has progressed a lot when it comes to raiding experiences. Like the bosses are getting better and better, both tuning wise and mechanics too. Like I was really hyped for Battle of the Star Lore. I thought like a lot of the fights, like opulence, everything, if they were tuned correctly, would be so amazing fights. But they just ended up under tuning most of the whole raid tier, ending up with only Jaina really being a difficult boss, which it was a really good boss. But if the raid like just had like a difficulty scaling that was a little bit better, making some of the mid-tier fights and like Megatoric and Stonewall a little bit harder, then it would have been probably one of my most favorite raid.
Oh yeah, I mean, you heard every personality that you could have heard on stream or in a podcast or anything about raiding before Battle of Dazzler was every single person singing the praises of this raid, like potentially Throne of Thunder tier good. And like obviously they missed the mark on tuning, but the ideas and the concepts and the creativity, I think those two things always don't go hand in hand. It's very possible that you could come up with an insanely complex and good boss like Opulence, like Mechatork, like Blockade, and then just have whoever's end idea of what it should be tuned for as far as the eye level and like what should actually be the marks. Like, obviously on Blockade, the last boss had, or the end boss, the Laminaria, had no HP. While the boats were probably tuned very well, the last boss had no HP. And then the last phase of Rostakon obviously was missing a mechanic or two, and like a lot of things you see like that. But like the actual concepts of what they were doing had everyone going wild. It was like this raid's going to be insane, and obviously they missed the mark. But Jaina was a, at the very least adequate, if not a very good end boss. It wasn't by any means like top ever, but I don't think they also didn't design for it to be killed the way it was killed. In a way, like it's like you have to look at Raden and Throne of Thunder, right? Like Raden was killed in a very cheesy way, but that was just because it was easier. Like the actual design of Raden was insane. Going back and forth between two phases was like super good, and a few guilds were able to mess with that. But it's just not how it ended up being killed. Like if you actually had to break blocks in the last phase of Jaina, the fight was actually insane. Like we had a lot of, even though we didn't do as well in that boss as we wanted to, like we actually had a lot of fun because that other shit was actually crazy. Like it was so hard. But
and the theories that we heard from you guys were just like, I remember it was like, is this misinformation or is this the most glowy brain strat ever? Like hearing about like how you guys were potentially going to throw everybody into blocks and like you're going to have like a few people. I think it was maybe monks and I know people. Some people talked about Retribution Paladins. A lot of people.
Frosty K, Red Paladin, and
Monk.
Havoc DH with Bellbrush.
Havoc.
But
okay.
and one monk, yeah. But it was the thing with that strat is we did not think the damage was possible in first week. That's why we ended up changing ever. We thought it was close, but we thought the reset wasn't going to be possible. So on Saturday we like kind of messed around with that strat. Now that strat was like, if the boss wasn't killable with the burn strat in P1, that was what we believed to be the only way you could kill the boss in P1, because there wasn't a damage check anymore. It was just difficulty, and it was very, very difficult. But we ended up basically doing that for 2 days, and then we got to it on Monday, and we're like, okay, well, I mean, we can get a reset of gear tomorrow and kill this in like 3 pulls. Like, we should just work on that. Like, we should just like we start preparing for that, and then they ended up killing it week 1. So it was like a mix between 2 things. I think if we would have came to it earlier, it would have came to fruition, and it obviously was doable. We were doing well with it. It just got to the point where, like, realistically, we weren't going to be able to finalize the strat in the 1 day on Monday, so we had to like swap back to it. Like, it wasn't the reset of gear that we needed either. Like, we had a lower pull on Monday night than we did in our kill, as far as like when we actually got to 10%, as far as where the phase was. And we had like the lust in the last phase, which I think, Method, you guys said you figured out. You just didn't end up swapping to it, where you found out you could lust on the boss at the end. But that's where we really found out that it was possible. And then we basically found out on Monday, like, oh fuck, wait, this is actually killable. So basically, we're just really, really bad at math. Like, we actually found out, like, we found out on Monday, we're like, wait, yo, like, it's definitely killable.
We found out late, but we saw the logs and we saw, okay, we don't need to do this to make a DPS check, so we just didn't end up changing anything.
Yeah.
Just stick with our strat.
I also do want to bring up, I feel like you guys both, as much as you're saying, like, it was really, a lot of the bosses were really easy as far as tuning went. Outside of, you guys both kind of got a little bit stuck on different bosses on the way to Jaina. I remember Method, you guys had difficulty with Mechatorque, right? And then it took Limit a little while to figure out Blockade. Wasn't that how it ended up working out? Or did you guys blast through Blockade in Limit? Did you guys get stuck on any boss leading up to Jaina?
We got stuck on Blockade, but it was, I don't know how many pulls Blockade would have had happened to us. We had the boss double C-swelled for the first 50 pulls, and also for the first 30 pulls. When you got to the end, like, the ads would not move. They would just sit there, and you just had to wipe, because we asked Blizzard, they're like, we have a VOD of it as well. I don't know if someone could link me that and I could share it with you. We were basically in the last phase with the boss at like 30%, and we have 3 ads up that we're not touching because they're just not moving, and we're like, can we kill the boss or what? Like, I don't know if we can kill it or not. And
that's right.
Yeah, and Blizzard says, like, yeah, you can kill it because that's on us, but like, obviously we're not going to do that. Like, imagine Limit killing that boss, and there already was some weird speculation that we like bugged it or something, and then it releases and none of our ads moved and we didn't kill them. Like, even though it was an easy boss, that would have been a really bad look. So
I forgot what it was with Blockade. That's why I was like, or did you just smash it? Because I remember that there was like a lot of stuff.
No,
trying to figure out what's going on.
Every boss leading up to Jaina was, including the second to last boss and the third to last boss, were 20 pull bosses, I think, or guilds had killed them there. And some of them were with videos, but Blockade was like 20 to 40 pulls. Now compare that in the past to some of the greater bosses, like Fallen Avatar was like hundreds of pulls, but also that was the best non-end boss ever. But
I was just overtuned in the beginning. They nerfed it.
Yeah, and that's like, if you compare it to that, it just didn't hit the mark. I think the idea, like, I don't know, when I looked at Blockade, I'm like, if they tune this boss to be hard, like, it could be crazy damage check, because you get overrun by ads, you get harpies, you get voltaic, but you end up getting to ignore the voltaic, making the healing on the last platform basically irrelevant. And then the ads had no health. It was just a huge disappointment. So yeah, I mean, just looking at the pull counts, they were just way too easy for good guilds.
Yeah, Gingy, I'm kind of curious how you feel. What do you think for Mythic the amount of pulls should be for a boss? Like, do you think it should ramp up? Do you think when you get to, because Avatar is interesting, right? You look at Avatar and mathematically impossible boss, of course, and you also have the ability to make decisions as a guild. It's like, okay, let's practice phase 2. Let's let it phase. Let's go down. Let's practice. And it was really interesting to watch guilds figure out how they were going to do different things on the boss. It took a lot of pulls to figure that out. Do you think that is what it should look like before you get to a last boss? Do you think that there should be a ramp? Do you think some of the bosses that aren't end bosses should take 500 pulls, 400 pulls, 300 pulls? Where do you think it should be?
Fallen Avatar is actually, it was one of the first bosses where you actually could see the last phase, like at the beginning of a fight, if you wish to do so. And Fallen Avatar was, for me, one of my favorite fights for sure. I was not a big fan of Gil'jaeden, but I loved Avatar. But as we came into it, the boss was a little bit overtuned. The DPS check was a little bit too high. But as they nerfed it by, I think it was 5% HP, it was manageable. But it was a really, really tight DPS check anyway. But that was like a perfect second to last boss in terms of tuning, in my opinion, where it literally needs to take maybe 200 to 250 tries to actually kill the boss, and then you get to like the later bosses where it's like 300 to 400 pulls, in my opinion. Be somewhere around that.
Consider Jaina. What if Jaina could have been like Fallen Avatar? Like, imagine how hard Fallen Avatar was, but think about how much harder it would have been if you could never go down and practice the last phase. Imagine on Jaina if you could just start the fight and instantly practice P3.
Just run off the boat and like
and
walk
practice
into
P3.
phase 2.
Or not even phase 2, like phase 3. Like, that's literally what you did with Fallen Avatar. Fallen Avatar, you had to go through a hard boss, and in my opinion, getting to 50% or whatever it was, where you went downstairs on Fallen 30, I don't remember what it was, but you whatever percent you got to Fallen Avatar and you went downstairs, that just getting to there was already harder than every other boss in that instance. So you had to do all of that just to see the last phase. And obviously that's after, you may be losing focus because it's far into the fight or whatever, but like basically it's way easier to learn a very, very hard phase in 2 segments and splitting it up rather than only learning it when you get to that part of the phase. Harder.
That was what's so unique, right? Because I think when we were commentating everything with Jaina, we just keep going back to the idea. It's like, was this a good pull, or did they manage to learn nothing? You get slammed in the face with the action movie, and all of a sudden it's a wipe after you've invested quite a few minutes. Everybody needs to get ready for the next pull, and so many times you do find yourself in a situation where it isn't any portion of a learning experience. And that was what was so cool about Fallen Avatar, was you can break it up and you can see all those things, and it thematically made sense. It made sense with the mechanics. I would love to see more encounters like that in the future. I think we all kind of would. It was very good design. But Bay, are we going to talk about MDI a little bit here? I have no idea what time it is. I have no idea how to read. I'm just locked in a glass cage right now.
Well, we've been weaving in and out of MDI and live raid stuff, but if you really want to bring up anything with the guests today about the MDI specifically, you have about 10 minutes. So shotgun round, go.
Oh, we only got 10 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Wait, I just want to say, I have had a fantastic time talking to all of you. I haven't gotten to talk to a lot of you guys in a little while, and it's been a really cool show. The time has absolutely flown by, but we should definitely, Tettles, I feel like this is kind of one of the first times that we've gotten to have you on the show. I want to hear your opinions on everything with the MDI. How do you like the new format? And I know you've taken many different roles in the Mythic scene, whether it is playing, whether it's actually working with teams, whether it is commentating. So want to hear your opinion. How do you like how this year's been shaping up?
So it's definitely okay. So the 3-cup system, and just it's better for the players in general. And the reason for that being is that there's more time. There's like less time to practice, so that ends up being better for the players because you don't have to practice 600 pulls of Maw of Souls just because you want the most optimized. But there's also been a little bit of downside to it, because with the 3rd cup, we've seen some really refined strategies for some dungeons. Like, I think Waycrest Manor and Shrine of the Storm are pretty cut and dry with what you should be doing for those dungeons. But overall, I think it's actually been pretty good. Unfortunately, the 3-cup system also allows the meta to get pretty stale, especially by the 3rd cup, whenever you do know what class compositions are the best, like by far. Obviously, we did see a little bit of issues this weekend just because of how some of the dungeons ended up working out with. You wanted an Unholy DK for Freehold, plus you wanted Dwarf Racial because of Necrotic, but then you really didn't want an Unholy DK for the next dungeon, but you also needed Shadow Meld, so you kind of needed to weigh your options as to what you ended up playing racial wise. But overall, it's definitely been interesting to have this 3-cup system, and I think JB would agree it's been a little bit better from a player perspective too.
Yeah, certainly the scheduling has been, I think, much preferred over the last MDI. That there was, I think, a lot of burnout with the amount of practice we got last time. Regarding the issue of the stale meta, I think actually I was, you saw in Cup 1 that the dungeons were set to an 18 key level, and then the 2nd cup you saw it jump to 19, and I think everyone expected the 3rd cup we were going to go to 20, and we didn't. And
thank God.
There'd be some speculation as to why that happened. but honestly,
I was so happy when I heard that. God,
I honestly think that that's King's Rest. I think that King's Rest is so overtuned compared to every other dungeon that you couldn't take it up to a 20 without risking there being legitimately some teams that just could not like complete a 20 King's Rest with certain affixes. Like,
did you guys see the East Cup? Oh my god.
Yeah, like it's like that. I think there are legitimately teams in the tournament. Like if you look at this week's affixes, Tyrannical Grievous, Golden Serpent. I think you would have had a lot of teams struggle to get past the first boss in a 20 Tyrannical Kings. I think a lot of teams would have been unable to do it. You would have just seen the team wiping over and over and over to the first boss. And because you have to set every dungeon to the same level, basically King's Rest precluded that jump to 20 this cup. And I think you would have maybe seen a shift in the meta if we were able to keep going up and up in level in these dungeons. You might start seeing like Demon Hunter, a very popular class on live because of how defensive it is, how much it can live through. Not really important in lower keys, and its damage doesn't scale as well as like Rogue and Monk. But I think if you would have seen the dungeon levels keep creeping up, you would have maybe seen DH get mixed in. But because you're stuck in the 19 range, you're just going to keep bringing the same classes that have worked, up to this point. And I think King's Rest is what's stopping them from continuing to jump the level of the dungeons each week.
I'm going to sound sadistic for a second here. We've already heard my opinion on the
Here
raid
we
race.
go
How much
again.
I enjoy watching. I love watching people get destroyed by dungeons. Like I think that it is kind of enjoyable. I've always been a big advocate of potentially having a format where it's definitely something that's hard to work out. But I love all the different aspects of watching the race, and I kind of like the idea. And I'm curious how you feel about this, JB, of seeing a format where you start out and it's an absolute race, and it's a low key that everybody's able to do that is incredibly easy. Different comps are brought because they just blow stuff up as quick as possible, and it is a pure speed run. You see something more in the middle ground that we're kind of used to, and then you see keys that some teams actually just wipe on. They get full screened, and it's a whole bunch of laughs. I like having the mix. Do you feel like there is a possibility to never have that mix? This is the ultimate difficulty check. This one's the speed run. This is the middle ground that we're used to. Or do you think that it should be focused on one aspect of what it means to be an MDI? Because even when watching your stream, you do things that are a very different skill set than I feel like are required for the MDI at times on your stream. And that's kind of pushing the highest key possible, figuring out what that takes. And I love watching you guys do that. And I feel like a lot of people who watch Mythic Dungeons in general like that aspect of the game too.
Well, certainly, I think there's been some debate about how high the keys should go. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody say they want to see lower keys than what exists in the MDI right now.
Perfect, I think.
Yeah, and I thought that the dungeon level they picked was really good. Going any lower than that as a healer starts to scare me, because you go lower than that and you start going, we don't even need a healer. We just 4 DPS this. I don't like the concept of breaking the archetypal MMO party of you have a tank, you have a healer, you have DPS, and at any point where it gets low enough that you don't need to bring the healer, it's like, to me, that gets away from the spirit of Mythic Plus.
It already almost got to that point too.
Right.
In my opinion, if that Shrine time trial was an 18 instead of a 19, I think it probably would have been no healed. Like you do like that instance is like we were doing it and completing it, and Jeeth's overall HPS was like 6k or something. It's just ridiculous. Like you could just wear like tankier shit or bring like some kind of like a hybrid thing, and it would have just been worth it.
But you gotta take the one swap thing into consideration as well, right? Like we go 4 DPS and then all of a sudden, oh fuck, we have to swap back to the Resto Druid, but we're playing a DK here, and it's bursting in this one, and we need a healer here,
Right.
I don't know.
One comment I would like to make on the overall, like, first of all, the whole stale meta thing, there's always a meta. There's always going to be a meta.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be classes that are better than others in certain situations. It just happened that this time, I think Shroud is something that definitely throws rogues like way over the line, but it's just about consistent damage. But all classes have consistent damage. Monk's utility is so insane. With bolstering, like Touch of Death is insane for like pulling like big stuff on top of other stuff. Like the meta makes sense, and they obviously bring a debuff, which could be argued as like whether that's worth it. But I think maybe what people want is like, oh, you go to this dungeon, oh, well, this class is better here. But I think along those same lines, the way that the tournament is formatted kind of limits you in doing that. For example, last MDI, you weren't able to swap classes, but you were able to swap gear for every pull. So you would go into a pull and you would swap on your speed boots and Cephus to do a massive kite pull on a tank, or you would run a Pride as on a boss that like could one shot you and Tyrannical, and like you would do all kinds of things like that. I think where you'd see other kind of swaps, like Gingy's saying, is like you don't run that in a cup, because like you're basically tied into whatever your best 4 DPS comp is if you want to swap back to a healer for a different map. And I think more. I don't see a huge deal in why there has to be a limit on swaps of races and classes. I think what would be super interesting, and for there to be a less stale meta, is to let you be as creative as possible as you want every time you go into a new map, and let you run basically whatever you want to run. There could be some kind of limitations, but I definitely think
class stacking should maybe not be a thing in a tournament setting.
Yeah.
Maybe not see the double rogue, and then of course you could make something like Shroud a global cooldown and give it to more classes. Like mages could have mass invis, hunters could have like a mass camouflage, something like that would fit the class fantasy, and then bring.
Had to bring it into hunters. Yeah, to bring it back.
maybe we give some utility to hunters. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Maybe buff hunters.
I'm not even going to bring up the nonsense with the class buffs and debuff system that everyone unanimously does not like, and Blizzard response was, well, we might make more of those. More unique, individual, really important things. Yeah, okay.
I think the one class or one character swap per, like, in between each series is kind of something that got left over from like last MDI, with how you ended up having like the map pool system, to where like you would lock in your comp for all 3 dungeons of the pool. So I think it's just kind of something that's left over, even though it's kind of altered a little bit. I think it's just left over from that pool system.
Yeah, I actually been having so much fun, and guys, we kind of burned all of our time. I know Limit's about to start raiding, and we wish you guys a lot of luck when you actually are getting back into the raids tonight, and you guys are going to clear Cabal probably again, so people can watch that encounter if you haven't watched it in a little while. And also, we wish you a lot of luck on Unot. I hope we can have this exact group again on the show, because I feel like there's a lot in the Mythic Dungeon world that we didn't get to talk about, and the conversation is very interesting. I could have talked to you guys for 8 hours. It was a lot of fun getting to see you all here, and wish everybody who's in that race a lot of luck. We got 2 people progressing in the race, and everybody who isn't necessarily progressing in the race and still working on Cabal and all of that, good luck in Mythics, good luck in everything. We'll talk to you guys very soon. And Bay, I think we're going to be doing this again tomorrow. The question is, will somebody have downed Unot by then?
We do have the US reset tomorrow, and the comparison from that to this and how that will feel if anything changes at all. We did see our best. I think we have 12.7. I know that Tettles had some back and forth behind the curtain discussion about the other best polls of other guilds, right? Aversion was even getting kind of close. I don't know what Pieces has got to. Tettles, do you?
I have no idea for sure. There was something out of the rumor mill that said that they had like a 5%er, but like obviously nothing that's
okay.
I think that boss has a high likelihood of dying tomorrow.
It agree.
It dies.
Aversion starting like on reset too, because it's like a German holiday or something, and then Pieces and Method, of course.
I totally said NA. It's the EU reset tomorrow. Yeah, today was the US reset, but I don't know if that's going to do anything. We talked about on the show today, too. I don't know if the gear all of a sudden changes anything else.
The gear will change nothing.
Yeah.
0, yeah.
But
still, we're hearing those predictions that it might die tomorrow. So, guys, you're not going to want to miss the show. We might be popping bottles of champagne, dancing with the lads after Unot finally falls. We'll have to see.
Oh, gosh. I don't know. But, again, thank you very much to MSI, Fanbyte, Twitch, Vertigear, Kensington, and Corsair for letting us put on this show today. And we'll see you back here tomorrow.